Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. Ready to explore some more uncharted territory with us? Today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that never fails to spark debate and ignite imaginations, UFOs and UAPs.
And we're going beyond the usual blurry photos and shaky videos this time. Right to the source. Recently declassified FBI documents from 1947.
1947. Wow. So this is like right after World War II, a time of huge change and uncertainty. Makes you wonder what kind of information the government was gathering back then, right?
It really does give us a glimpse into those early investigations. And what's fascinating is these particular documents revolve around something called the Maury Island incident.
Okay. Maury Island incident. That sounds ominous. What exactly happened there?
Well, picture this, June 21st, 1947. Harold Dahl, a harbor patrolman, is out on patrol near Maury Island in Washington state when he encounters not one, not two, but 6 flying discs.
6 flying decks. Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
According to Dahl's account, these weren't just fleeting glimpses. These discs were described as being circular, about 100 feet in diameter, with a visible hole in the center and what looked like portholes along the rim. Imagine seeing that.
Yeah, I'd probably think I was hallucinating or something. Did he say what they were doing? Just hovering there?
He described them as hovering in the air with minimal movement, almost like they were observing the area. Then things took a turn for the dramatic.
Oh no. What happened? Did they, attack him?
Well, according to Dahl, one of the discs appeared to malfunction, and another one swooped in like it was trying to help. Then the malfunctioning disc started ejecting debris, which ended up damaging Dahl's boat, injuring him, and allegedly even killing his dog.
His dog. That's terrible.
Right.
Did they ever figure out what caused the malfunction or why it was ejecting debris?
Sadly, no. The documents don't provide specific answers to those questions, but they do tell us that Dahl managed to collect some of that debris, described as metallic fragments, which were later sent for analysis.
So we have an eyewitness account, possible physical evidence, and a tragedy. All within just a few weeks of Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting in the same area.
Right.
Talk about timing.
Absolutely, you're right. It was just weeks after Arnold's sighting of 9 disc-shaped objects near Mount Rainier, which many consider the catalyst for modern UFO interest. So naturally, Dahl's story captured a lot of attention.
Makes sense. So this wasn't just some random guy claiming to see something weird. This was happening in a context where people were already starting to pay attention to these kinds of events.
Exactly. And you know who else took a keen interest? Kenneth Arnold himself. He was already becoming a bit of a UFO investigator after his own experience.
So Arnold was actually involved in the Maury Island investigation. That's fascinating.
He was, and not just him. 2 Army intelligence officers, Captain Davidson and Lieutenant Brown, decided to meet with Dahl at the Winthrop Hotel in Tacoma on July 31st, 1947, to discuss the incident and examine the fragments.
So the Army was taking this seriously enough to send intelligence officers. They must have been pretty intrigued by what they were hearing.
They were definitely intrigued enough to take possession of the fragments for further analysis at Hamilton Field in California. But what I find really interesting are the details surrounding this meeting.
What kind of details? Give me the juicy stuff.
Well, Dahl was initially quite hesitant to share his story. He actually claimed he'd received threats warning him to stay quiet. And then there's this anonymous tipster feeding information about the meeting to the Tacoma Times, which of course sparked rumors of a cover-up.
Threats. A cover-up. Now, this is sounding like a spy thriller. What happened next?
Well, on your hats, because just one day after that meeting, the B-25 bomber carrying Captain Davidson and Lieutenant Brown crashed near Kelso, Washington, killing both officers.
No way. What are the odds? Was it ever determined what caused the crash?
The FBI investigated thoroughly, and their conclusion was that there were no disc fragments on board and no evidence of foul play. But the timing, just one day after that meeting with Dahl, was incredibly suspicious.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially with all the talk of threats and a potential cover-up, it's hard not to wonder if there's a connection.
And that's what makes the Maury Island incident so captivating. It's shrouded in mystery, unanswered questions, and a tragic twist of fate. It's like a window into a world where the line between reality and speculation becomes blurred.
I'm already hooked. What else is there to uncover about this case?
You know, it's almost like they were conducting 2 separate investigations. A public one focused on calming anxieties, and a more clandestine one behind the scenes, trying to get to the bottom of it.
That's a really interesting point. And it makes you think about the level of secrecy that surrounded those early UFO investigations.
Exactly. And speaking of investigations, the source material also points to a pattern of in-depth inquiries into other sightings around this time.
Like what kind of sightings?
Well, for instance, there's a document dated August 14, 1947 that describes a report from Twin Falls, Idaho. A man and his two sons witnessed a disc-shaped object flying down the Salmon River at incredible speed.
Down a river, that's not something you hear every day. Did they give any details about the object?
Yeah, the witness said it was about 20 feet long, 10 feet wide, and a few feet thick. He even reported seeing flames coming out of the sides and hearing a loud swish as it vanished.
Wow, that's a pretty vivid account. Were there any other reports that were particularly striking?
Oh yeah, actually, several. Another report from the same period describes an incident in Portland, Oregon. Multiple witnesses this time, including experienced pilots, they saw a formation of disc-shaped objects flying at high altitudes.
So it wasn't just isolated incidents. We're talking about consistent reports from different locations,
Mm-hmm.
all describing similar objects with these unusual flight patterns.
Exactly. And it's that consistency in the descriptions and the credibility of many of the witnesses that makes these cases so compelling.
Yeah, especially when you consider that some of these witnesses were experienced pilots, people who were trained to identify aircraft.
Mm.
And they're saying they've never seen anything like it.
Right. And it's not just visual observations. They describe maneuvers that would be impossible for conventional aircraft.
So what was the official explanation at the time? Did they ever figure out what these objects were?
Publicly, the Air Force maintained that most, if not all of these sightings could be attributed to misidentifications of known aircraft weather phenomena or even hoaxes.
But we know they were doing their own digging behind the scenes. Did they really stray from that public explanation?
Well, the documents we're looking at don't reveal any definitive conclusions. But there are hints that even within the Air Force, there was a growing sense that at least some of these sightings couldn't be so easily dismissed. I mean, they were interviewing people like Kenneth Arnold, who was already publicly advocating for serious UFO research.
Right, so there was this real disconnect between what the public was being told and what was actually going on in those top-secret meetings.
Exactly. And that disconnect really fueled a lot of the speculation and conspiracy theories that still surround this topic to this day.
So multiple credible sightings,
Uh-huh.
secret investigations, and a public dismissal. It's the perfect recipe for intrigue and mystery. What else can we glean from these documents about how the government was handling all this?
One interesting detail is that the FBI was already using a specific term, unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, to categorize these reports.
So the term UFO wasn't just a media creation. The government was already using it internally.
Precisely, which shows that they were taking it seriously enough to create a specific classification for these unexplained events.
It makes you wonder what other terms or classifications they might have used that we haven't discovered yet.
Oh, absolutely. The documents we're looking at are just a glimpse into a much bigger story. There are likely countless more documents and reports out there waiting to be declassified.
As we delve deeper into this, it's clear that the government's response to UFOs during this period was much more complex and nuanced than we might have initially thought. They were trying to grapple with something they couldn't explain while also managing public perception and national security.
You've hit the nail on the head, and it's that interplay of factors that makes this era so fascinating. We see a government confronting the unknown, trying to balance skepticism with a genuine curiosity.
And as we've seen so far, the more we dig into this, the more questions we uncover.
Exactly. And one of the biggest questions of all centers around the incident that arguably launched UFOs into the mainstream consciousness, Roswell.
Ah, yes. Roswell, synonymous with crashed spaceships, alien autopsies, government cover-ups. That's where we're headed next, right?
You got it. We're going to take a look at what the source material reveals about the official response to Roswell and what insights it might offer into this enduring mystery.
I can't wait. This is where things get really interesting. Okay, so we've gone deep into these declassified FBI files, unearthed the early days of UFO investigations, and now we've reached the Holy Grail, Roswell. It's a name that's practically synonymous with alien encounters and government conspiracies.
It really is amazing how Roswell has captured the imagination. Even though the documents we have don't directly address the supposed crash itself, they do offer some intriguing hints about what happened afterward and how the government responded.
So what do they tell us about the official reaction to Roswell?
Well, one document in particular caught my eye, a memo from August 14, 1947. It mentions that the Portland FBI office was getting inquiries about newspaper reports of flying discs in their area. And get this, it references Captain Davidson and Lieutenant Brown. Remember them? From the Maury Island investigation.
Yeah, of course, the two Army intelligence officers who died in that plane crash right after meeting with Harold Dahl and Kenneth Arnold.
Exactly. Well, this memo says that just days before that crash, they were in Portland interviewing pilots who had reported seeing unusual objects in the sky, including Kenneth Arnold.
So even before Roswell hit the headlines, there was already an effort to investigate these sightings and maybe try to downplay them.
It seems that way. The memo goes on to say that the theory at the time was that the Air Force was trying to wash out the disk reports, but basically debunk them because it was clear they weren't military aircraft.
So this pattern of investigation and potential downplaying was already well established before Roswell even happened. Fascinating.
Isn't it? And it continued in the aftermath of Roswell. The same memo describes how a story started circulating that the plane carrying Davidson and Brown was actually transporting parts of a disk, the one that supposedly hit Dahl's boat in the Maury Island incident.
Oh, wow. So people were connecting the two incidents, suggesting that the crash might have been deliberate to keep those fragments from being examined?
Exactly. And while the FBI concluded there weren't any disk parts on the plane and no sign of foul play, the fact that this story gained traction really highlights the level of public distrust in the government's handling of all this.
It seems like Roswell, whether it involved an alien spaceship or not, became a lightning rod for all the anxieties and suspicion that had been building around these unexplained events.
I think you're right. Roswell became a symbol, a representation of this belief that the government was hiding the truth about UFOs, and that mistrust, fueled by conflicting accounts, official denials, and a lack of transparency, well, it continues to this day.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the early days of UFO investigations, what are the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
I think it's crucial to recognize that something truly extraordinary was happening in the skies back then. We have so many credible accounts, from experienced pilots, military personnel, everyday citizens, all describing objects that performed in ways that defy conventional explanation. And while we may never know for certain what these objects were, the evidence suggests they were much more than just misidentifications or hoaxes.
It's also clear that the government's response to all this was much more complex than simply brushing it off as nonsense. They were actively investigating, even while downplaying the significance to the public.
That duality is a key element of this whole story. They were trying to understand a phenomenon that they couldn't explain, while also managing public perception and national security.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening. It's a great reminder that the search for truth is an ongoing process, and sometimes the most amazing discoveries are found not in the sensational headlines, but in those meticulous examinations of historical records and first-hand accounts.
Absolutely. It's about putting the pieces together one by one, and always staying open to the possibility that there's more to our world than we currently grasp.
And, as we always say here on The Deep Dive,
The truth is here.